There's a peanut butter jar in the Gallagher kitchen with cash hidden inside it. The kids call it the squirrel fund. Every dollar in it was put there deliberately, not because the family was saving for something, but because the adults in the house couldn't be trusted to keep anyone fed through the winter. It isn't savings the way other families have savings. It's insurance, a collectively guarded fact hidden in plain sight that says, we can survive without you. Monica finds the jar, and during a manic episode, she empties it, not for food, not for rent, not for anything the family needs, to buy Roberta a truck nobody needs. Purchased with the only money standing between the Gallagher children and complete free fall. I've been thinking about that moment for a long time, not because it's the worst thing Monica does in the series, it probably isn't, but because I think it contains something the show never quite names directly. The question isn't whether Monica loved her children. I think she did, genuinely, completely, in whatever way her illness left available to her. The question is why that love kept producing the same result as neglect. And the answer to that question doesn't live entirely in Monica's story. It lives in someone else's. Someone who inherited the same illness, stood at the same crossroads, and made a different choice. Someone whose story changes everything about how you look at Monica once you understand what he was actually up against. But we'll get there. To understand why the jar moment hits the way it does, we need to understand what Monica's brain is actually doing when she empties it. Shameless is more medically accurate on this point than most people realize. Because mania isn't bad decision-making. That's the common misunderstanding. That manic behavior is reckless behavior. That the person knows something is wrong and does it anyway. What the show gets right is that mania is certainty. The part of the brain responsible for weighing consequences, pausing before acting, asking whether something is a good idea before executing it. During a manic episode, that system isn't working. Monica isn't pretending to feel like a good mother in those moments. She genuinely believes she is one. And that's what makes the crash so much harder to explain to the people it lands on. Because how do you tell your children that the mother they just spent 3 days loving was also, in some neurological sense, not entirely there? The warmth was real. The love was real. And the person who produced both of them is now gone, not to somewhere else, but to somewhere inside herself that nobody can reach. That's what makes the high-functioning manic episodes so devastating for the people around her. Watch Monica when the mania is running, cooking elaborate breakfasts at 3 in the morning, filling the house with noise and warmth and motion, buying gifts nobody asked for and couldn't afford. For a few hours, she becomes exactly the person the Gallagher children have been waiting for. The laughing Monica, the affectionate Monica, the mother Fiona half remembers and Debbie still hopes exists. And it isn't performance. From Monica's perspective in those moments, everything she's doing makes complete sense. The love feels real because it is real. The illness just removes every filter between the feeling and the action. Which means the crash, when it arrives, isn't just a disappointment. It's a betrayal the children have no framework for. Because they just spent 3 days watching their mother be everything they needed, and now she's gone again. Here's what makes Monica more painful than Frank to talk about. Not worse, more painful. And that distinction matters. Frank's neglect is a known quantity. By the time the Gallagher children are old enough to understand their situation, they have already built an entire survival system around the specific shape of Frank's failure. The squirrel fund exists because of Frank. The way Fiona runs the house exists because of Frank. And while that's a devastating way to grow up, predictability carries a strange mercy inside it. When you stop expecting anything, the disappointment stops arriving. You've already accounted for it. Monica does the opposite. She gives the children exactly what they've been waiting for, and then takes it away. Not once, repeatedly across years, in a cycle they can feel building but can never quite prepare for. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called intermittent reinforcement, the mechanism behind gambling addiction and relationships people know they should leave but can't. The core finding is this: a reward delivered unpredictably creates a stronger attachment than one delivered consistently because the brain never stops chasing the next win. Frank taught his children not to expect anything. Monica taught them to keep hoping. And hope in the Gallagher household turns out to be the most dangerous thing she could have given them. And the truck is where you can see exactly what that hope costs. Because the detail that reveals the most about Monica isn't that she took the money, it's what she did with it. Frank steals for reasons everyone understands: alcohol, drugs, a bar tab. His theft is selfish but legible. You can follow the logic. Monica buys Roberta a truck. She doesn't purchase anything for herself. And that difference is everything. She isn't buying a truck. She's buying a feeling, gratitude. The look on someone's face when they feel completely loved. During a manic episode, that feeling isn't just pleasant, it's confirmation that she is exactly the person she believes herself to be. The jar was the children's promise they could survive without their parents. Monica emptied it, chasing the proof that she was finally the parent they needed. Before we get to Ian, we need to talk about the moment Monica became impossible for many viewers to forgive: Thanksgiving. By the time we reach that scene, Monica is deep inside a depressive crash, severe enough that the person we watched filling the house with warmth and noise and elaborate breakfasts at 3 a.m. has disappeared entirely. And this is the part of Bipolar 1 that is most often misunderstood from the outside. Catastrophic depression doesn't feel like sadness from the inside. It feels like certainty, a different kind of certainty than mania, but certainty all the same. The conviction that you are a burden, that everyone would be better off without you, that your absence would cause less damage than your presence. That's not melodrama. That's one of the most well-documented realities of severe depressive episodes. And it's the reality Monica is living inside when she walks into that kitchen. Understanding that doesn't make what happens easier. It just changes what we're looking at. Because the most devastating thing about that scene isn't Monica, it's Fiona. Fiona doesn't get to be a daughter in that moment. She doesn't get to panic or collapse or process what she's seeing. She immediately becomes the manager of the catastrophe, hiding the blood from the younger kids, keeping dinner moving, absorbing the entire disaster into herself so the house can keep functioning for one more hour. People often call that resilience. Resilience is something you choose. What Fiona does in that kitchen is something she was forced to become. A 19-year-old handed her mother's suicide attempt as a logistics problem, solving it because someone has to, and there is no one else. That is the cost the show makes visible. Not Monica's pain, though that's real. The cost that lands on everyone standing close enough to catch it. Which brings us to something the show handles more honestly than most dramas would dare to: medication. The show reveals quietly, not as a dramatic plot point, but as a background fact, that Monica is prescribed medication capable of stabilizing her. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough to change the cycle. And she stops taking it. Not once, repeatedly. And before that becomes the end of the conversation, I think it's worth sitting with why. Monica's explanation is real. The medication doesn't just reduce the lows, it reduces the highs. It flattens everything. And if you've spent your entire life experiencing the world in extremes, the medicated version of yourself can feel less like recovery and more like a kind of loss. Not weakness, not selfishness, loss. The quieter version of Monica is safer and more sustainable and genuinely better for everyone around her. And also smaller, duller, less alive in the specific way that feels most like herself. So Monica isn't choosing between being sick and being well. She's choosing between two versions of herself. One version is destructive and bright and feels completely real. The other version can show up, can sustain something, can keep the jar full, and feels, from the inside, like a dimming. And that's the choice the show never lets Monica off the hook for, while simultaneously never pretending it was a simple one. Because the version of Monica that could show up consistently isn't just less exciting. From Monica's perspective, it's less real. And every time that choice appears, she reaches for the version that feels most alive. And that question, whether the quieter version of yourself is still worth becoming, sits at the center of this entire story. Because someone else in this family eventually faces it with the same illness, the same medication, the same flattening, and what he does with it changes everything about how you look at Monica. Ian Gallagher is one of the most capable people in that house. Early seasons Ian, before the illness fully arrives, is disciplined, driven, clear-eyed about what he wants, and willing to work for it, in a way that distinguishes him from almost everyone else in the family. He enlists, he trains, he builds something that looks, for a while, like a version of the Gallagher life that might actually hold together. And then the mania comes. What the show does next is the most important thing it does with this entire storyline. Because it doesn't announce Ian's diagnosis dramatically. It shows you the symptoms first, the grandiosity arriving quietly, the decisions that feel brilliant from the inside and look increasingly dangerous from the outside, the certainty that this plan, this relationship, this version of himself is finally the real one. And if you've been watching the show long enough, you start recognizing what you're watching before the characters do, because you've seen it before. In Monica's kitchen, at 3 in the morning, when the breakfasts were elaborate and the love felt infinite and everything was finally okay. For most of the series, being called full-on Monica is one of the worst things a Gallagher can say to another Gallagher. It means reckless, untrustworthy, someone whose judgment cannot be relied on in any way that matters. Monica isn't just a person to these kids, she's a warning they carry around with them. And then Ian starts becoming that warning in real time, and something shifts in how the audience experiences it. When Monica spirals, the show has already shown us years of accumulated damage. The jar is already empty, Thanksgiving has already happened, Fiona has already been handed too many logistics problems to count. The frustration arrives alongside the compassion or ahead of it, because the hurt got there first. When Ian spirals, we're watching it happen in real time before the damage accumulates. We understand what his brain is doing while it's doing it. And that understanding creates something the Gallagher children never got to experience with Monica. Compassion before damage, the explanation arriving before the cost. That resequencing is everything, because it means when Ian faces the medication choice, we're inside it with him. We understand the flattening he's describing. We've heard Monica describe the same thing. And we feel the specific weight of what he's being asked to give up, not abstractly, but in the particular texture of the Ian who trained and enlisted and built something, who now has to decide whether that quieter version of himself is still worth becoming. He takes the medication, not because it feels right, not because the manic version of himself has stopped feeling real, because he makes a decision that Monica never quite managed, that the life he can sustain is worth more than the person mania keeps promising he can become. He chooses the smaller version of himself, the version that can show up, the version that keeps the jar full instead of emptying it. That choice is where their stories finally separate, not at the diagnosis, not at the symptoms, not even at the medication, at what they each decide the medication is for. Which brings me back to the jar. I don't think the Squirrel Fund was ever really about money. It was a promise that tomorrow could be better than today, that there would still be something left after the next disaster. The Gallagher children spent the entire series protecting that promise. Monica spent most of her life unable to see it. Not because she didn't love them, because every time she had to choose between the version of herself that felt most alive and the version that could actually show up, she chose alive. The love was always there. The willingness to shrink for it never arrived. Ian found that willingness. Monica never quite did. And I think that's the closest thing this story has to an answer, and the furthest thing from a verdict.